If to be not only a descendant but also an heir denotes the superiority of man over animals, then the objectification of the mind in words and works, organizations and traditions is the basis for this distinction by which man takes possession of his world, or even of any world at all. If this objective mind of historical society is its cultural content in the widest sense, then the practical cultural significance of its individual elements is measured by the extent to which they become factors in individual development. If we presuppose that Newton's discovery was only preserved in a book which no one knew, it would still be part of the objectified mind and a potential possession of society, but no longer a cultural value. Since this extreme case can occur on countless levels, it follows that in society at large only a certain proportion of objective cultural values become subjective values. If one looks at society as a whole, that is if one arranges the objectified intellectuality in a temporal objective complex, then the whole cultural development, assuming it has a uniform representative, is richer in content than each of its elements. For the achievement of each element is incorporated in the total heritage, but this heritage does not permeate each element. The entire lifestyle of a community depends upon the relationship between the objectified culture and the culture of the subjects. I have already mentioned the significance of numerical factors. In the small community of a lower culture, this relationship will be almost one of perfect equality. The objective cultural possibilities will not extend much beyond the subjective cultural reality. An increase in the cultural level, particularly if it coincides with an enlargement of the group, will favor a discrepancy between both. The unique situation of the Golden Age of Athens was due to the fact that it was able to avoid this, except perhaps with reference to philosophy at its peak. Yet the size of the social circle does not yet in itself fully explain the divergence of the subjective and the objective factor. On the contrary, we must now search for the concrete, effective causes of this phenomenon. The division of labor as the cause of the divergence of subjective and objective culture. If we wish to confine the cause and its present magnitude in a single concept, then it is that of the division of labor, in terms of its importance within production as well as consumption. With regard to production, it has been emphasized often enough that the product is completed at the expense of the development of the producer. The increase in psychophysical energies and skills, which is the result of specialized activity, is of little value for the total personality, which often even becomes stunted because of the diversion of energies that are indispensable for the harmonious growth of the self. In other cases, it develops as if cut off from the core of the personality, as a province with unlimited autonomy whose fruits do not flow back to the center. Experience seems to show that the inner wholeness of the self basically evolves out of interaction with the uniformity and the completion of our life task. The unity of an object is realized for us only by projecting ourself into the object in order to shape it according to our image, so that the diversity of determinations grows into the unity of the ego. In the same manner, the unity or lack of unity of the object that we create affects, in a psychological practical sense, the corresponding formation of our personality. Whenever our energies do not produce something whole as a reflection of the total personality, then the proper relationship between subject and object is missing. The internal nature of our achievement is bound up with parts of achievements accomplished by others which are a necessary part of the totality, but it does not refer back to the producer. As a result, the inadequacy that develops between the worker's existential form and that of his product because of greater specialization easily serves to completely divorce the product from the laborer. Its meaning is not derived from the mind of the producer but from its relationship with products of a different origin. Because of its fragmentary character, the product lacks the spiritual determinacy that can be easily perceived in a product of labor that is wholly the work of a single person. The significance of the product is thus to be sought neither in the reflection of a subjectivity nor in the reflex of a creative spirit, but is to be found only in the objective achievement that leads away from the subject. This relationship is equally well illustrated by its extreme opposite, the work of art. The nature of the artwork completely resists a subdivision of labor among a number of workers, none of whom on his own achieves a whole unity. The work of art, of all the works of man, is the most perfectly autonomous unity, a self-sufficient totality, even more so than the state. For the state, though it may be autonomous under specific circumstances, does not envelop all its elements so completely that each may not lead a separate life with its own interests. Only one part of our personality is interwoven with the state, while the other parts may revolve around other centers. Art, however, does not grant significance to any of the elements within the context in which they are set. The individual work of art destroys the manifold meanings of words and of tones, of colors and of forms in order to preserve in our consciousness only such aspects as are relevant to the work. This autonomy of the work of art, however, signifies that it expresses a subjective spiritual unity. The work of art requires only one single person, but it requires him totally, right down to his innermost core. It rewards the person by its form becoming that person's purest reflection and expression. The complete rejection of the division of labor is both cause and symptom of the connection between the autonomous totality of the work and the unity of the spirit. Conversely, where the division of labor prevails, the achievement becomes incommensurable with the performer. The person can no longer find himself expressed in his work, its form becomes dissimilar to the subjective mind and appears only as a wholly specialized part of our being that is indifferent to the total unity of man. Where the work is based on a marked division of labor and achieved, with an awareness of this division, it thrusts itself inherently towards the category of objectivity. It becomes more and more plausible for the worker to consider his work and its effect as purely objective and anonymous, because it no longer touches the roots of his whole life system. The more completely an entity composed of subjective components absorbs the parts, and the more the character of each part serves only as a part of the whole, then the more objective is that whole and the more is its life independent of the subjects who produced it. Generally speaking, a broadening of consumption corresponds to the specialization of production. Even the most intellectually and occupationally specialized people today read the newspaper and thereby indulge in a more extensive mental consumption than was possible 100 years ago, for even the most versatile and widely interested person. The broadening of consumption, however, is dependent upon the growth of objective culture, since the more objective and impersonal an object is, the better it is suited to more people. Such consumable material, in order to be acceptable and enjoyable to a very large number of individuals, cannot be designed for subjective differentiation of taste, while on the other hand only the most extreme differentiation of production is able to produce the objects cheaply and abundantly enough in order to satisfy the demand for them. The pattern of consumption is thus a bridge between the objectivity of culture and the division of labor. Finally, the process that is characterized as the separation of the worker from the means of production and which is itself also a kind of division of labor clearly operates in the same direction. In that it is the function of the capitalist to acquire, organize and allocate the means of production, these means acquire a very different objectivity for the worker than for those who work with their own material and their own tools. This capitalistic differentiation fundamentally separates the subjective and the objective conditions of work, a separation for which there was no psychological reason as long as both were united in the same hands. In so far as work itself and its direct object belongs to different persons, the objective character of these objects must loom extremely large in the worker's consciousness, all the more so as labor and its materials themselves form a unity and their usual proximity makes the present polarity all the more noticeable. This process is continued and reflected in the fact that, in addition to the means of production, work itself is separated from the worker. This is the significance of the phenomenon indicated in the statement that labor power has become a commodity. Where the worker works with his own materials, his labor remains within the sphere of his own personality, and only by selling the finished products is it separated from him.